Emma Raducanu's shocking retirement at Wuhan Open. Heat wave causes medical emergency. The day began like any other match day, but by noon, the air over the Optics Valley Tennis Center in Wuhan felt like it could burn through skin. The temperature touched 42 degrees Celsius, 107 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity clung to every breath, and the stadium shimmered under a furnace sky. The Wuhan Open 2025 was supposed to mark Emma Raducanu's triumphant return to form, a long-awaited resurgence after months of rebuilding her body and confidence. But instead, it would become one of the most heartbreaking chapters in her story. She had trained for weeks in the Chinese autumn heat, working on endurance and balance, telling herself, "I'm ready this time." But nothing could prepare her for the suffocating wall of heat that awaited that afternoon. As she walked down the tunnel, racket bag over her shoulder, sweat already dripping from her temple, she whispered to herself, "One point at a time, one game at a time." It was round one, against Lee, an opponent she respected but expected to overcome. No one, not even Emma, could have predicted what was about to unfold. The calm before the collapse. From the start, the signs were subtle. Emma's first serve, usually fluid, sharp, began landing short. Her footwork lagged slightly. Her gaze flickered toward the sun more than usual. Spectators fanned themselves desperately. Bald kids in wide-brimmed hats stood in pools of shadow, their faces flushed. By the fifth game, the thermometer near the umpire's chair blinked 44 degrees Celsius. The court surface itself, sensors later revealed, reached nearly 60 degrees Celsius. Still, Emma pressed on. "I can't quit," she muttered under her breath between points. "Not again. Not now." She won a breathtaking rally. 22 shots, ending with a forehand down the line that made the crowd roar. But instead of celebrating, she walked slowly to her towel, shoulders heaving, eyes dimming. Lee crossed the court to offer a fist bump, perhaps sensing something wrong. Emma smiled weakly, lifted her racket, and said softly, "I'm okay." But she wasn't. A body betrayed. By the second set, the heat had turned merciless. Sweat drenched Emma's visor. Her legs trembled. Her serve speed dropped by nearly 20 kilometers per hour. She looked like a warrior wading through fire. At 3-2, she began to wobble slightly after serve. The umpire noticed. The crowd fell silent. Emma steadied herself, walked toward the baseline, and then stumbled again. The trainer sprinted onto court. Her father, Ian Raducanu, watching from the stands, stood up instantly. Her physiotherapist rushed down the aisle. "Pulse rapid," the trainer said. "Dehydration, heat stress." Emma tried to wave them off. "Just give me a few minutes," she whispered. "I can finish." But as she sat in her chair, her hands shook uncontrollably. The world around her blurred. The umpire leaned over. "Emma, we're calling it." She shook her head weakly. "No." But her body made the decision before her mind could. She collapsed forward, the racket falling from her fingers like a broken wing. The emergency. Paramedics were on court within seconds. Fans held their breath as a stretcher was brought in. Some cried openly, remembering how fragile greatness can be. Emma's face was pale, lips dry, and her skin glistened with salt and sun. An oxygen mask was placed over her mouth. Her pulse was checked, her heart monitored. Heat exhaustion with early signs of heat stroke, one medic said. "She needs cooling now." They placed ice towels over her neck and wrists, sprayed her arms with cold mist, and rushed her toward the tunnel. As she was carried out, she lifted her hand slightly, a faint wave to the crowd. The applause that followed was not just for the match. It was for the spirit, the hospital hours. That night, social media exploded. Hashtag Pray for Emma trended globally. Tennis stars from around the world, Goff, Osaka, Halep, even Federer, sent messages of support. At the Wuhan General Hospital, Emma lay in a cool recovery room. Her fluids dripped steadily beside her bed. Her mother sat quietly by her side, stroking her hair. She awoke after several hours, confused. "Did I finish the match?" she whispered. Her mother smiled gently, tears in her eyes. "You finished what you could, darling." Doctors told her she had narrowly avoided a full heat stroke. Her body temperature had reached 40.3 degrees Celsius. Any higher could have caused organ failure. For the first time since her U.S. Open victory years ago, Emma felt small, human, and fragile again. The media storm. By morning, every major outlet in the world carried a headline. Emma Raducanu retires from Wuhan Open after medical emergency. Some framed it as tragedy, others as warning about the growing threat of climate conditions in outdoor sports. But for Emma, reading those headlines in her hospital bed, it felt like déjà vu. Another setback, another reason for the critics to question her resilience. Her agent, Max Eisenbud, visited with a small smile and said, "You don't owe anyone an explanation. You survived the court. That's all that matters." But Emma, ever the fighter, disagreed. "No," she said softly. "I owe the truth to myself." The reflection. 3 days later, Emma held a short press conference. Not from the stadium, but from her hospital room. Cameras filled the corridor, lights blinding, microphones outstretched. She appeared calm, wrapped in a loose white hoodie, her hair tied back, and four still taped her arm. "First of all," she began, voice steady but emotional, "I want to thank everyone for their messages. What happened in Wuhan was scary. I felt strong going into the match, but nature had other plans." She paused, eyes flickering to the window where sunlight spilled through. "Sometimes your body whispers. Sometimes it screams. I ignored the whispers." She smiled faintly. "I've always tried to be tough, to push through everything. But this was my wake-up call." The room went silent. I'm not quitting tennis. The legacy of heat. The Wuhan Open of 2025 would go down in history, not for the title, but for the lesson it left behind. The WTA soon introduced mandatory cooling intervals and on-site emergency response upgrades. Emma's fall had redefined athlete safety for generations to come. But for Emma herself, the real victory was internal. "I used to think tennis was everything," she said later. "Now I know it's a part of me, not all of me." One final note. Months later, Emma returned to Wuhan, not to play, but to speak. She stood at center court, now under retractable roofing, addressing a crowd of young players. "When I fell here, I thought it was the end," she began, "but it became my new beginning." She looked toward the far stands, the place where she once collapsed, and smiled. Sometimes a fire that burns you is the same one that forges you. Thunderous applause filled the stadium. Epilogue, the flame within. That night, as the sun set over the Wuhan skyline, Emma Raducanu sat on her hotel balcony, sipping tea and watching the sky glow orange. She opened her journal again and wrote, "The world remembers me for the times I won, but I'll remember myself for the time I refused to quit, even when my body did." She smiled, soft, serene, unbroken. The champion was still here, different, stronger, wiser. Because sometimes the greatest victories are not measured by trophies, but by the strength to stand up after you fall. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, and share. Till next time.